Hi Faith, how are you?
I'm good. I'm my screen name was Rick, so
Fair enough.
that was my dad with the EEG.
Right. And
They were
how
trying to
how
they were trying to diagnose him with brain death.
right. And what happened in the end?
They ended up donating his organs, or they ended up declaring him brain dead.
Okay. Do you think it was accurate?
I don't think so. I mean, I've been continuously like trying to learn more about it since then, and I still don't believe it. It's actually the more I look into it, the less I believe that diagnosis.
How long ago was that?
Almost a year.
Okay. Do you know if two independent doctors did brain death testing?
I'm pretty sure um that not like officially, like there was a big he had a large care team, but like two separate neurological experts, or do they have to be specialized in that field typically?
They do. They do.
Yeah, I think there was only one neurologist I noticed on his reports, but he wasn't even present when he was declared dead.
So it's only afterwards that you had second thoughts?
Well, I wasn't someone had already like okayed the donation and all that before I had called. I live in a different state, so it was a little bit harder.
I see. You were more or less hands off.
Yeah, I was able to contact them one time over the phone, and then I couldn't get them to pick up the phone after that.
Right. And you weren't the power of attorney, so you really couldn't stop whatever was happening.
No, but yeah, no, and there was dispute over the power of attorney, but the hospital ended up choosing, yeah, someone who okayed it.
Mm. Do you have access to the medical records?
I do it. A lot of them seem to self-contradict. I'm trying to see if I can pull them up.
Mm.
Oops. Oh, I can't pull it up with the camera on right now. But yeah, and I've been trying to like learn more about what they all mean ever since then. But um, they also didn't give us all of the records, and I managed to make my dad my chart account, and that's actually how I got most of the most important records. It wasn't through the record request.
How many days passed between ICU admission and your dad being declared brain dead?
It looks like it was only a couple hours before they started planning for, at least planning for it, and then it was only 3 days from admission until they actually did the organ procurement. So
Three
it's
days.
before any of his test results came back. So it's before they could have possibly known their prognosis.
Huh. So we're talking about hours, not even days.
That's what it seems like. There was just that's based off of one single comment that I noticed in his medical records that said uh, something about one of the family members bring it like one of the family members brought it up, actually, not even the doctors, that he would have wanted to donate his organs, but this was when he first like barely got to the hospital. And so but it commented, it wrote at the end of the comment, coordinating with the organ procurement team and planning on palliative extubation. He was
Interesting.
originally admitted for a cardiac arrest, but like unknown cause of it.
Wow. Wow. That sounds, like if there's a few days passing by and all the tests are being done, you know, fair enough. But it sounds to me like just by what you're sharing here, it's all being rushed, or it was all being rushed.
Yeah.
Did your dad have an organ donation pass? Was he a voluntary organ donor?
He his license did have the donor sign on it at least. So that's a little reassuring, but he wasn't registered in that state. He had just barely moved there. So they still needed the permission from someone to go forward with it the way they did,
Right.
especially to go forward so quickly before they knew the diagnosis or the diagnosis.
Right. Right. Wow. Okay. And are you seeking any recourse or?
Yeah. It's, I'm not sure what claim I should be focusing on with that type of issue. Should I focus on the inaccuracy of the medical record, or because it's more competitive to get a lawyer to take your case for medical lawsuits. So I'm not sure what aspect would be the most promising claim.
I couldn't tell you because I am not a lawyer. I'm a clinician. How what we could focus on if you wanted some help. We can look at the medical records whether we think there's any foul play, and then you can take it to a lawyer, right? So I couldn't tell you what would be the most promising way to go about it. Where we can definitely help you is looking at the negligent side of at the negligence.
Like the medical standards of care and all
Yes,
that.
medical standards of care.
Right.
Have there been any? It sounds to me like they couldn't move quick enough. If we're talking about hours.
Yeah. And
Normally, what I've seen when I've worked in ICU, if you have someone coming in where there's a high chance of them being brain dead, you would still wait 2-3 days to get all the testing done. Also, make sure the families understand, that there's a process and that there's due diligence.
yeah, we've been asking, or I've been asking for the hospital policies since it first happened, and it's been almost a year, and they still haven't let me see even just a hospital policy. Which, I mean, I'm pretty sure the U.S. laws regarding organ donation require you to have a specific policy in place that you follow the same way for everyone.
100%. 100%. Nothing, I've been saying this here for the longest. Nothing happens in a hospital without a policy. Mopping the floor, cleaning the window has a policy. So brain death testing, organ donation definitely has a policy.
Yeah. This was in Arkansas, so I've had to try to catch up with the laws over there because it's so different from California.
Right. Yeah. Right. And do you have any other family members that also have second thoughts, or is it just yourself that's sort of digging into this?
I'd say about half of my family members. Not many of them are totally against the idea of a malpractice suit, but um, at least half of them are they're at least not interested in pursuing it. But there's still a lot of people that fully agree that it wasn't, whatever it is that happened wasn't right, and it's just hard to grasp what really it was that happened because it's so confusing.
Yeah. How old was your dad?
He was only 60.
That's not very old.
Yeah, he had a previous injury he had been in a severe car accident a year earlier, but he was mostly recovered from that at that point. But they tried to use that as an excuse, like, oh, he's been in and out of the hospital all year, trying to make it sound like he was sicker than he was. And I realized this later on after I reviewed his medical records. And yeah, they were just trying to exaggerate his injuries, and he had a midline shift in his brain from his car crash, but that had actually improved. From his last scan, it was actually the best it had ever been since his car crash. He still had one, which they used as an excuse, but it had actually gone down by I forget what the measurements goes by, like a millimeter, or it had.
It would be by millimeters. Yeah, would be by
Yeah.
millimeters.
Yeah, and they still never bothered to find the cause of the cardiac arrest event either.
Yeah, because they had other They had other priorities
Yeah.
by the
Half
looks
of
of
his test
things.
results didn't even, the result date for half of his test results from that hospital stay, the last hospital stay, they didn't even come back until after they had already declared him dead. So they didn't even check him.
Right. And if I may ask, who's signed off on it? Was it a family member, or did they override you as a family?
Kind of like a little bit of both. There was like, so his sister, who had been kind of out of the picture for like until right when this happened, all of a sudden she was saying that she was power of attorney, and they still haven't let us see that form though, that supposedly she had. And then they called when she was the first, she was the one that I had brought up the idea of organ donation. Before anyone even asked her. Uh, I would assume before most people would naturally think of in that situation. Like it was so fast. But and then they called my brother, and the problem with that is that they lied to him about my dad's current condition. They told him he was already dead. That I forget if they told him he was already dead or already brain dead. But either way, he wasn't either at that point. His death certificate even states it was like 2 or 3 days later that he was actually declared dead even. After they had called my brother. So they basically said like, okay, so he's already dead, and we just need permission to if it's okay to donate the organs and make some use of it. That's how they said it to him. They lied to him, and that's been added a lot of extra trauma to him for him to have to deal with, because he feels like he's feeling some responsibility for it, even though he didn't have the right information.
You mentioned that they said to you or to your brother that he's dead or brain dead. Now, in most jurisdictions, when someone has been declared brain dead, in most jurisdictions, they are then also legally dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, having said that, there was a case in 2013. I don't know whether you've heard of it. It seems like miles away now. But there was a case 2013 in California. There was a young girl with the name of J.I. McMahon. She was a 13-year-old girl declared brain dead after a tonsillectomy, cough going horribly wrong with the cardiac arrest and whatnot. The family took that to court and said, no, we disagree that when someone is brain dead, they're not legally dead. We believe that our daughter is still alive and so forth. And the courts then gave the family the ability to transfer their daughter to New Jersey, because in New Jersey, apparently, brain dead doesn't equal legally dead.
Or they allowed I think it's the only state that allows religious exemption. Or
I
at
would
least
assume
that's
that family was religious. I would believe so. I don't know the ins and outs. What I do know is that they transferred her to New Jersey, and she lived there for a few more years before she passed away.
yeah. I've seen videos of her responding to commands. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
who's drawing the line? What people perceive as being dead when the heart is still beating.
and they're trying to change the definition of, or add to the definition again, it seems like recently. And so it's like it kind of makes, for me at least after that personal experience, it I it really feels like every time there's something that's outside of the realm of what they're allowed to do. I mean, like the organ procurement organizations, it seems like all they do, like their strategy is just to change the definitions of words or to make up new words until it seems legal or acceptable. And then they
Yeah,
just do it regardless of whether or not the public has approved it or voted on it or whatever.
yeah. Changing the goalpost.
Hmm. Rather than actually achieving it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I do believe we are on a very slippery slope at the moment. As a society, in how do we deal with life? How do we deal with death? Especially in those situations when patients are in intensive care. COVID has put a whole different spin on that. People were dying in ICU without families being present. What door did we open there for hospitals to do whatever they wanted while families weren't? So we are on a very slippery slope here, I believe.
Yeah, I think well, not all hospitals, but like at least
No.
the ones that lack ethics, they saw it as an opportunity for themselves for their personal gain. I mean, the COVID situation, and they really have been kind of lawless since then, or at least, my experience.
Very much so.
And actually, one of the things that I only had one real request when I was talking to them on the phone, which was just let my dad die naturally, please, then. And they didn't want to take him off of life support because they wanted to keep his organs viable.
Of course.
So they wanted to keep him on all the life support and not let him have a natural, peaceful death. But at the same time, he's not worth extra efforts to save. It's, it's counter.
Double standards.
Mm-hmm. It didn't make any sense that his organs were worth the effort, but he wasn't. So.
He wasn't. Yeah.
And the last things I said before I hung up the phone was, you have to wait as long as possible, like, because they were saying it's going to happen. They're going to take him to the OR within a few minutes when I was hanging up the phone. So I said, postpone as long as possible. Like at least give me an hour just so I can call my lawyer and consult and figure out what my dad's rights are in the situation. And he was declared dead 2 minutes after that phone call hang up by a coroner, supposedly.
Did you speak to a lawyer at the time?
No, not that day. I called Adult Protective Services and then immediately called the hospital back, but they weren't picking up calls at that point.
Wow. So you felt like really it was just slipping out of your hands without any, with you out being any, my goodness.
Yeah, and then when I reviewed the law, like even the state laws for Arkansas, I mean, it looks like the law, or like the HHS rules even, it says that the hospitals are required to inform everyone what their rights are when there's a dispute or something like that. And the fact that I specifically mentioned I need to consult a lawyer, I need to know what my rights are and what my dad's rights are, and they did the opposite, that's, obviously it's offensive because, I mean, this is about a human life and valuing and respecting human life.
Do we? Like, I don't know whether this is a much wider debate, but I don't know whether you are aware of what's happening in Canada at the moment. They are more or less advertising euthanasia. If you've gone bankrupt, if you are disabled, you can sign up for euthanasia. If you have a mental illness, what happened to personal responsibility? What happened to valuing human life in all forms?
Yeah, and it feels so similar to like similar at least to what's going on here, but yeah, they're just advertising it like it's
Just
out
no
of
big
empathy.
deal. No
Yeah.
big deal. There's an app. You can book your euthanasia appointment at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. No big deal. We'll take care of it. That's where we're going.
Yeah, and there's so many horror stories already. And Canada, that's a pretty fresh idea over there, isn't it? Or how long has that been happening?
I guess Justin Trudeau. I don't want to get political here, but Justin Trudeau. Like this lefty lunatic, in my eyes, woke madness. In my eyes, I think it's all Justin Trudeau over there and woke culture.
Yeah.
I don't know where we there's no more God now. Now we'll just euthanize people.
Yeah, and it's the issue that people don't immediately recognize, I think, is the slippery slope issue that it really is that it's not only the people in severe pain that doctors are going to do this to or allow for this to happen to when we legalize it, especially like how Canada has done it without you're like the first thing you should make sure are established and in place are the legal safeguards when you're doing something so risky.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's like the last concern or last priority in Canada, how they've done it.
Well, but it's also coming back to your situation. It also sounds to me like that was the least of the concerns for the hospital. They just seem to rush from one thing to the next. Couldn't take care of it quick enough, could they? By the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, by the time I called, it was, the same day they declared him dead, and so he was already in the hospital like three or so days by then, and so they had already gotten approval to do so. They had already planned it, and now I was coming in, I was probably just annoying to them at that point, like coming and being the first one to dispute it.
So Faith, so from admission to hospital to your dad being declared dead, how much time did pass?
He was admitted on January or July 2nd, and he was declared dead on July 5th.
3 days, 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I thought, is it true? Uh, are they required typically to um, know the cause of death to declare brain death? I thought that was a requirement for brain death in the U.S.
So that part I couldn't answer you. What do you know? What's in the death certificate?
It says cardiac arrest. Yeah, and right above it, it
Mm,
says right above the cardiac arrest, it says it recommends or it says don't ever write cardiac arrest or never write a mechanism of death as the cause of death, and gives the example cardiac arrest as what not to write. And right below that, they still wrote cardiac arrest.
doesn't sound right to me if he was supposedly brain dead.
Exactly. And the only cardiac arrest he ever had was on July 2nd, not the 5th. So that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And he just happened to have a cardiac arrest 2 minutes after the phone call hung up. I just, I don't think
Mm.
I think because it was a confusing situation, the person who was writing the certificate was probably misunderstanding what was going on. But I mean, that's their job. So
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. That's very,
yeah,
very sad.
yeah. I
Um,
think the whole issue is also like uh, a disability rights issue because of the whole like quality of life uh, catchphrase that they like to use a lot and things like that, and they assume that they really try to act like prognosis is undisputable, but prognosis is just a guess, and they they act like they don't know that when they're during these conversations.
and they also act like, oh, if someone has a disability because comes out with a disability out of an intensive care stay, they act like, well, their life is not worth living.
Yeah, exactly. and
Who's
and
That's
just
not
because
for them.
he was physically disabled, like I said, from a car accident, but he still wasn't sick. Besides the physical disabilities, he had already mostly recovered by then. So overall, he wasn't a sick person. And right
And,
before the car accident, he was very in like amazing shape. So like it's he wasn't nearly as bad off as they try to make him sound. But in their words, just because he was in and out of the hospital, that means he was a sick person.
he was very happy to be alive, it sounds like.
So grateful. It says it throughout his records, and every time he met with a occupational therapist or anyone like that, he would say he would be so grateful they showed up. He'd be so happy to do his exercises and so motivated. That's the number one thing everyone always said who met him is that he was so motivated.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we are, like I said, the whole, when I talk to families, when I talk to doctors, this, oh yeah, this person won't have any quality of life, so what's the point? Well, who are
Mm,
you to make that judgment?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah.
And
And
what's the other question that I always have in a situation like that is, what's the rush in killing people? Where's the hurry in that? Tell me
yeah,
why.
it's like they're almost afraid of that person recovering.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, and his GCS was a 3, or I forget if it was yeah, it was a 3 for his last hospital stay.
If it was even a 4, he would not have been branded.
What about 3?
3 might be. 3 might be branded, but when I say might be, this is where time comes in. So there's plenty of patients in ICU right now. They might have a GCS of 3 because they are in an induced coma.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. It's hard to say if they really ever gave him enough time off of
Correct.
sedatives.
Correct. You know, as soon as you take someone out of an induced coma, if they are not brain dead, their GCS should improve pretty quickly.
Mm. Yeah, and it seemed like the protocol they used for they would keep him in medically induced state, like induced coma state, most of the time, and then they would give him a few hours off of the they would give him
Sedatives.
propofol. Like so of course he's not gonna respond, but I
So
don't
are
know.
you so are you saying they were using propofol even though he was already declared brain dead from their end?
Oh yeah, they were still using anesthetics on him after the declaration of brain death.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, a lot of the medical records don't totally make sense, and a lot of them contradict themselves. They'll say one thing and then the opposite thing the next page. So it seems like a lot of the notes in there, or at least some of the notes in there, seem to be like haphazardly just written in to compensate for not having a diagnosis and things like that. I don't know. Because, like, for example, I think they tried to blame it on a lactic acidosis, his state he was in, but that doesn't make sense because he had a acute kidney injury. His kidneys were working fine before then. So my understanding is lactic acidosis takes a while for the acid or buildup of material in your from your kidneys not functioning, right? It has to be chronic kidney failure.
Look, there's other things that could lead to lactic acidosis too, including electrolyte imbalances, which is not uncommon for patients in ICU.
Yeah,
But
and
again,
he
we
also
would,
was on a lot of medication still, so I don't
yeah,
know how much that affected it.
yes, most likely, most likely. So, so what are your next steps? Are you considering a medical record review, or or are you just trying to get more information?
Yeah, well, before I had all the records, paid, I had ordered a medical review from your company, and but it was kind of a lot of guessing even at that point because we didn't have a lot of the medical records yet, or we hadn't found a lot of them yet. But I was
Right,
considering possibly paying for one-on-one consults, like preparing all the records that now that I've had a lot of time to study them, like instead of just paying for another review of the records, I was thinking about maybe instead scheduling a one-on-one consult after I put together which records I think are most important, or at least which ones I have questions on still specifically.
right, right. Sure. Yeah, now I remember now, Faith, of course. Yeah, we're talking to so many clients. I do apologize. I do remember we were reviewing earlier in the year.
Yeah,
Yes,
I called you, I think, like the week after it happened.
right. Yeah, yeah. Do you know the volume of the medical records? It can't be that big if it was only for 72 hours.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty big stack overall just because we have the whole previous year worth of medical
Right,
records too, just to compare to see the validity of his medical condition, like of the prognosis to see and to try to figure out what caused his cardiac arrest. But the it's only like I think around 2,000 pages if you include all the nurses' notes and whatnot for the last hospital stay. But a lot of his appointments from his car accident injury were at the same hospital that he ended up dying at. So some of the records are kind of mixed.
right. I see. 2,000 pages just for the 72 hours?
Well, I think that document includes pages from earlier the year too. I think
Yeah. It sounds too much like 2,000 pages.
yeah, I had to combine the nurse's notes document, which was I think at least 100, and then the one that the hospital actually gave us, which was like 1,000, no, 700, and yeah, so maybe it's more like a little over 1,000. Probably just if it's only for those dates.
Right.
But and what kind of labs are usually um like important for them to track in those
Sure.
situations?
So in a situation like that, they would need to look at all the pathology results, starting from full blood count, like hemoglobin, white cell count, electrolytes, but also like coagulation. Do you know what I mean with coagulation?
Yeah, he did have it said like delayed clotting time or like PPT. It was like it would take too long to clot.
Yeah, yeah. Things like that. They would have to look at every little detail because you would want to find out why did he have a cardiac arrest. Also if he was going for organ donation again, you would need to look at the clotting time and all of that. What's the risk? Would an organ potentially bleed out by taking it out if the clotting time isn't right? Things like that all need to be considered.
Yeah,
There's nothing they shouldn't really be looking at.
yeah. We have the hepatic panels and kidney panels and all that.
Absolutely, all of that. And they would have looked at hepatic and kidney, especially with the view of organ donation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying.
Did they donate kidneys and liver?
I'm not sure totally everything they got. I assume. Well, I don't know. Yeah, because if he had kidney and liver damage, then I'm not sure what would even be useful. Because he also had when he had the car crash, he had a collapsed lung, so they're not getting the lungs out of it either. I don't know what they were
Right,
trying to get.
right.
I know they took his corneas and some skin grafts and bone marrow or something.
Okay. Okay. Faith, I do need to wrap this up. I usually only have an hour to go.
Okay.
If you wanted to continue the conversation, you know how to get hold of me,
Hmm.
or if you wanted us to look at medical records. I really appreciate you sharing, your story publicly
Hmm.
with our audience. I think it is really important that, if you are in a similar situation, that you try to put a stop to it as quickly as possible, because from, hearing your situation, they couldn't move quick enough by the
Yeah.
sounds of things, which is
Yeah.
horrible.
It sounds like it seemed like almost hearing my disagreement with them moving forward with it seemed to rush them even faster. They started moving forward even faster as soon as I called. It seemed like as soon as they knew there was a dispute. But yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Faith, for sharing. And if we can help you with a medical record review or with anything else you need, you know how to get hold of me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.